Now imagine what you would do if you had the real knowledge of the birth of the solar system, of the development of human beings, and the God energy of the universe. How did they know that back then?
There was light.
Rogan has this conversation about how the Bible got it right about a lot of things, and brings up another question about the Bible being right when it comes to certain creatures.
Terence McKenna once said it best, that science asks of you one miracle. That's the Big Bang.
Yeah.
There's one miracle.
Yeah.
It really is kind of like a miracle.
Yeah.
If in the beginning there was nothing, and then God created the earth and the skies. And it's essentially what the Bible is trying to say. They're just doing it in a way.
And the Bible got it right. They got the order right.
Right.
You know?
I think it's based on an understanding that people had achieved. Because if you think about the Bible, right, and if all these people are correct about the original history of sophisticated civilization, if the Randall Carlsons and the Graham Hancocks and the Robert Shocks of the world and the John Anthony West, if they're correct in the timeline of, like, say, the most sophisticated society that we are aware of, which is Africa, if those people that lived in Africa 30,000, 40,000 years ago in Egypt, if they created a society that was infinitely more sophisticated than anything that we had ever seen before, like, how did they do that? Who did that? And what was that like? Like, what was that like? What was that world like back then? I mean, have you ever really stopped and tried to think and imagine what was that world like back then? I mean,
well, how about that you have a similar world in Central and South America where they also had built things many thousands of years ago that still, like, how the fuck did you do that?
Yeah. How'd you do that?
Easter Island. How did y'all make those things?
Yeah.
How in the world? And then move them?
Well, I think if those things go down and then people have to rebuild, I think it takes a long time before people figure out what happened. I think it takes a long time. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion that you see in the Bible comes from. Like, God made the earth and the sky and everything in like 6 days, right? And then on the sixth day he rested. Okay. What are they actually saying, though? You're getting things that are translated from an oral history of 1,000 years, and then they're writing it down in Aramaic, they're writing it down in ancient Hebrew, and you're getting it many years later, long after.
Diluted and
all kinds of. Think about what people are willing to do today to the Constitution. Today. With all the information that we have about the dangers of this, think about what they're trying to do today. Now imagine what you would do if you had the real knowledge of the birth of the solar system, of the development of human beings, and the God energy of the universe, and you tried to translate it over an oral history, because there's chaos, because there's no more cities anymore, and everyone's dead, and you're just like hunting and gathering as cave people, and you're trying to relay this origin story of mankind. And then it gets written down in parables, and it gets written down in Latin, and it gets translated over the years. And then people try, okay, then they sit down and they look at it many years later and they go, what the fuck were they trying to say? Like, what were they trying to say? Because so much of what they're trying to say, if you're really paying attention, like, it seems like it's kind of laid out like the origins of the universe. If in the beginning there was nothing.
Yeah.
Like, they're talking about the Big Bang. If these scientists all agree, how did they know that
then
back
there was
then?
light. That would be the Big Bang.
Why wouldn't they assume back then that God was always around? Why would they assume that God had to make everything? Why would they assume that there was a beginning and an end just because they...
Fun fact, everyone didn't assume that God made everything. A lot of the gods that were not from the Bible were actually already in the universe, and a lot of them were in wars, and when they fought, that's what created kind of order to the chaos. But they weren't like creating everything. They were already created. Besides the God of the Bible was outside of space, time, and matter, and he created time and brought order to the chaos. But yeah, the Bible is right about a lot of things. How did they know that if it wasn't for God?
Have a beginning and an end? Is that rational? Why would they assume that? And why did everybody assume that? Maybe because they knew. Maybe because at one point in time, whether it's 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, they had figured a lot of it out.
Well, someone figured something out for the pyramids and the way that they were built.
Yeah.
To be aligned so perfectly with a true north and
just to be able to construct them. If those people were that smart, why wouldn't we imagine they had an understanding of the birth of the universe? Why wouldn't we imagine that they would have this bizarre understanding of the way morality and good and evil play out with human beings? Yeah. Maybe they were right. Maybe they were right, but it all just got fucked up over the thousands of years after asteroid impacts and the thousands of years of the destruction of the advanced civilizations and the world going back into chaos and then slowly rebuilding. And you're rebuilding with these ancient texts that you find in clay pots in Qumran. And you ever seen when they translate like the Dead Sea Scrolls and they lay them out and they have to try to figure out which pieces go with which scroll and they do it based on DNA. All this DNA is from this cow, so let's take this scroll from this cow skin and put it together and try to read what the fuck they said. It's incredible.
Well, those scrolls were of the Old Testament. I think just proving the point that the Bible is authentic because those scrolls meant and mean the same thing as the Bible that we read today in English. So there wasn't some crazy mistranslation of translation that you like to think.
But it makes sense. It makes sense if you buy into the idea that there's been a restart of civilization. And then you go back and say, okay, what is the history of the Bible? Like, how old is it? What's the oldest version? Like, what's the oldest version of the stories?
Version. Like, yeah, who knows?
Right, who knows?
Version.
Right. What was the original? Like, you're playing a game of Telegram, right, or telephone with over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
With who knows how many people. But if we've seen what the Egyptian people were able to build, what was that like? How sophisticated were they? And maybe what we're getting at in the Bible is just the longest game of telephone of a true story. It's just all kind of gumbled up in stories and God's testing you and all this thing about, God telling this guy to kill his kid. It's just a little screwed up. But it's showing you that there are evil forces at play and there are temptations.
It's
and you must
digestible
resist
lessons
those. Yes.
in a story that you can understand.
Exactly.
And that's
but at
why
the heart
7
of it, there's
days,
some truth to it.
Because what is a day to God?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Is that a
The
billion?
Bible says that 1,000 days is like one day for God. It's funny how like Joe Rogan knows bits and pieces of the Bible, but not really hardly anything. And how he likes to correlate some just vaguely thing that he knows about the Bible to kind of his worldview.
Million years?
Yeah.
A million years?
100 billion?
Who knows?
Who fucking knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
But it's presented in a way that you can digest it.
Yes. And then our version of it is this simplified, uneducated, barbaric version that gets translated from people that are involved in sword fights. They're fighting each other with swords and hacking each other to death for thousands of years while they're telling this story. The Crusades, all these different things that people did during that time, horrific things. And during that time, they're doing it, many of them, in defense of their God, in defense of their religion. They're motivating people by these books.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff. It's fascinating. But when you hear a guy like Tucker Carlson saying that what else do you know, bro? Say what you know. Like, what makes you say that? Because if that really is what it is, that would make sense to me why the government would keep that information from people. Because if we found out that people were essentially just a vessel of souls and that we are essentially designed to give birth to artificial intelligence, and then that will be the end of us. So that's why they're not worried about nuclear war. That's why they're not worried about the environment. That's why they don't give a about anything. This is all coming to an end.
We're there.
Wow. Well, you saw recently that Tucker Carlson admitted that he was attacked by a demon, and he said that he had literal scratch marks on his side after sleeping, which is also something that's crazy. But yeah, our bodies are vessels of a soul. We all have a soul. That's why we are different than any other animal, because we are made in the image of God, and we have a. What size shoe does Shaquille O'Neal have? Wow. So Shaquille O'Neal, his shoe size is 22. That's insane. But this They're guessing their shoe sizes.
Them on the earth.
There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bare children to them. The same become mighty men, which were of old. That's crazy.
The earth.
So is this just proving that the Bible is... But I love how they reference the Bible verse from Genesis, showing like in those days there were giants that lived among them. And so maybe the Bible's not so crazy after all. Maybe there are some things like Joe Rogan was talking about, is the Bible is right and God, he was right all along. So comment down below your thoughts on this, whatever that may be. I would love to hear them. And thank you guys so much for watching. In the description below, you can click the link to help you decide to follow Jesus for the first time. I encourage you to do that today.